We had mentioned yesterday that the main value of God communicating with a person who's qualified for that communication, which very few people are qualified, because he has to have certain very special qualities and characteristics and attributes to be the location, to be the vessel to receive that communication. But if he does qualify, what is that person supposed to learn? What is being taught as a result of this connection when God connects with the soul? We find the concept of tzaddik v'ralo, Rosh v'tovlo. You have a tzaddik where he has a life in the material, a life of dread, although he's a tzaddik. And you find tzaddik v'tovlo. A tzaddik, he has all the amenities of life plus, all the material. He doesn't have the struggles of the tzaddik who's ralo. Why? So we've mentioned many times, the difficulty of understanding it is not conceptually speaking, but rather why did God choose this person to be the tzaddik v'ralo and this person to be the tzaddik v'tovlo? Why is his predicament a different predicament? One tzaddik is way down on the totem pole. He barely is able to make ends meet, has issues over his head in terms of material issues. And the other tzaddik, he has whatever he touches, whatever is the Midas touch. Why? So conceptually, it's important to know every soul has a unique profile. The objective of coming into this existence is to meet challenges, and those challenges will perfect that soul. Because without challenges, which is due to one's initiative, that's how the end result is perfection. The nature of the tzaddik who's tzaddik v'ralo, for him to perfect the soul, he has to experience tremendous, overwhelming difficulties. And despite those difficulties, he succeeds. That's how he perfects his soul. It's because that's just the nature of his soul. That's what he needs. The tzaddik who has another profile, for him to perfect his soul, he has another kind of challenge. Despite the bounty, despite all the acknowledgement, he's still humble. He's still dedicated. He's not distracted. It's a whole different reality. But only God knows the profile of the soul, and he's the one who writes that narrative for that person. But every person's narrative is tailor-made exactly to fit that soul to achieve the objective, which is perfection. So the difficulty is not conceptually, but why this soul needs that and that soul needs that. The answer is only God knows, because only God knows the makeup of the soul. That's the difficulty. But conceptually, we understand it. Now, very often, a prophecy doesn't even relate to anybody other than the person. A person has a task. Let's say a person's own personal task is to achieve, give you an example. The Gemara tells us, Talmud tells us, that 36 hidden tzaddikim in the world. Hidden. Who are they? Nobody knows, but they know. And maybe even they don't know. Because the evaluation is really God's evaluation. But let's say they do know. Now the question is, how does that tzaddik, how is he able to achieve and advance his spirituality? God somehow has to reveal to him and give him certain insights and understanding of the reality of the world to be able to appreciate opportunity and to make choices that those choices are not available to the average person. Because the average person just glosses over many things and doesn't realize what is and what's not. But because this person has received the communication from God, and he understands exactly what God's glory is and how to address God's glory and what in existence exists to address the glory, therefore he knows exactly what his parameters of choice are. So there, the prophecy is purely for the prophet himself. It's not to influence anybody. It's purely for his personal advancement. How does he advance as an individual? There's certain concepts. We speak about kavanah. When you pray with a certain intent. And that intent, infusing it into words and having that sense of negation to God automatically allows the person to elevate himself and to give his actions another dimension of value. So there, the prophecy is purely for the prophet. It's not to influence anyone. It's purely for him to understand exactly how does he climb this enormous ladder, which is endless. As it says by Yaakov, the ladder, its feet were on the ground, but the head extended into heaven. How do you reach heaven? Unless God gives you the insights how to ascend this impossible ladder to ascend, unless you have those insights, you have no idea how to ascend that ladder. How do you climb that mountain? From what side of the mountain do you climb it? What do you avoid? How do you navigate life? All these understandings are communicated to prophet, but that prophecy is purely for the prophet on a personal level. And you have another prophet. He's meant to influence others. So he has to share things with others. He's a disseminator of fact, of knowledge, of wisdom. If that's the case, what God communicates him, that he has a certain appreciation of God, the value of that is not only for himself, it's to be able to share with others and direct others and to set things in the community or in the Jewish people to guarantee that there's a future of the Jewish people. But he doesn't speak in the name of God. But God revealed to him, gave him the inside scoop, so to say, exactly what makes things happen and what things will be impediments not to allow things to happen. Now, there's an expression in English, sage wisdom. The man is a young man. He has sage wisdom. How does he have sage wisdom? You know, a young boy, child, he's precocious. Being precocious is not sage wisdom. Sage wisdom means a person has knowledge and developed, but he's beyond his years in terms of what he understands. He's endowed with a foresight that nobody's endowed with. He sees and understands things which other people don't understand. That's sage wisdom. The Navi, through this communication, it's not something he comes upon it, but rather he's communicated this understanding because he has that capacity, because he qualifies to have beyond, he has divine wisdom. And that divine wisdom allows him to move mountains and be influential, to be behind the scenes. People don't even have to understand who he is. But he is what we call the mover and the shaker. They used to speak when I first came to New York, I never knew what the term meant. Then the movers and the shakers, referring to Wall Street. But the real movers and shakers, as it says, tzaddik yisod olam, the tzaddik is the foundation of the world. What causes the world to rise and to soar are these 36 hidden tzaddikim in the world. They have the power. They generate the power for existence. They have the basis for blessing. I mentioned famous Chazal that every day there's a heavenly voice that comes out from Sinai and announces to the world, Kol olam kulo nizam b'shu Chanina b'nei. The world is sustained in the merit of Chanina ben Dosa. Shedailo b'kav charubim ad me'erev Shabbos erev Shabbos. He's a man, he lives below the subsistence level. He survives on a small measure of carob from erev Shabbos to erev Shabbos. And the whole world is sustained in his merit. You understand? The man has barely what to eat, but all the bounty in the world is due to him. What does that mean? So who's the mover and the shaker? Who's generating the energy and all the blessing in the world? It's all emanating from this little Jew who nobody even knows who he is. He doesn't have two nickels to rub together. Nothing. But again, what makes things happen is not the material, it's the spiritual. And because he has understanding of the value of that spiritual, he maximizes on it and he makes decisions based on that understanding, and therefore he moves mountains. And the world is a different world because of him. Rabbi Lezben Hurkinis, who was a Rebbe of Rabbi Akiva, he was the teacher of Rabbi Akiva. He was excommunicated. Why was he excommunicated? Because there was a halachic dispute, and the majority of the rabbis disagreed with him. And he wasn't willing to back down. And the Torah says you must follow majority rule. He wasn't willing to back down, and he kept his position. And because he wasn't willing to back down, they excommunicated him. The rabbis excommunicated him. And when they excommunicated him, you understand, he was a very holy rabbi. And he had a reason why he didn't pick. They did what they were supposed to do. And because of the way he understood it, he wasn't permitted to back down from his position. So they excommunicated. When they excommunicated Rabbi Elazar Hurkinis, you know what the Talmud says? There were gale winds in the ocean, ships sank. There was blight. There was tremendous destruction in the world. Why? Because when a man like Rabbi Elazar Hurkinis suffers, and he is the generator who generates all blessing in the world, when you clip his wings and you cause him pain, the consequences. And God reacts to it. The tzaddik is suffering. He's being disgraced. Even though they had a right to disgrace him, because the law was he should be excommunicated. Doesn't make a difference. It's what he represents. He wasn't a prophet. But again, he had understandings due to divine inspiration, which is less than prophecy. But the prophet is given understanding of his soul, of his ability, of his capacity, and what exactly he's supposed to be doing. And that understanding, which is communicated not through his human faculty, but through the soul, he's committed to it, and you cannot take him off track because of that. We read in the Torah, and I mentioned this, I didn't finish the thought. There's a story where Ishmael was the son of Avram, who was born to him from Hagar. She was the Egyptian princess. Sarah Imenu, Sarah the matriarch, she was barren. And she says to Avram, take my maidservant, and you will bear a child from her. And maybe in that merit, I will have a child. And she did. And that was Yitzchak. Yitzchak was the patriarch. Born to Sarah at the age of 90 years old. Ishmael was the son of his mother, who was an Egyptian woman, and his behavior was not on par. And Sarah Imenu had seen and had detected this, which Avram did not. And she goes to Avram and says, you must drive the maidservant with her son from the house. Why? Because I see certain behavior patterns on a subliminal level. It's going to interfere and be an impediment for Yitzhak to develop as the patriarch. You don't see it, but I see it. When Avram heard this, he was pained that he has to actually send away his beloved son. So God says to Avram, whatever Sarah says to you, you should listen to her, heed her voice. Meaning, what she's telling you is prophetic. She has the ability to see things which is beyond your ability. She's a greater prophetess than you are. So therefore, what she understands, you don't understand. And Avram sent off Yishmael with his mother. And what happens? They're in the desert. And Yishmael's dying of thirst. And Yishmael prays that God should save him, and his mother's praying for him. And the Torah says, God responded to the supplication of the lad, of the youth. And all of a sudden, an oasis appears. And his mother realizes this water in the desert. She takes the water, gives it to her son, and saves his life. This is the story. But the Torah tells us, when God responded to Yishmael's supplication, it says, Basher Husham, because at the location he was at that moment. What does it mean? He was in the desert. What do you mean? Where he was at that moment. When he was praying, it wasn't so simple. God was going to answer. Why? Because the angels come to Hashem and they say to God, you realize if he lives, his descendants, going fast forwarding 1,500 years, when your children are going to exile after the destruction of the first temple, they're going to be cause of the demise of your children. Because as they're going to exile, they're going to be parched and hungry. And his descendants are going to offer flasks, skins of water to your children. They're going to first feed them salty fish, and the Babylonians will allow it. And then they're going to offer them empty skins with stale air. And they're going to be so parched from the salty fish, they can inhale that air and they're going to die. And that's going to be the ploy. Do you want to save a man where his descendants are going to be the cause of your children's death in the future? Therefore, they said you should not perform this miracle on his behalf. Better he should die to avoid the tragedy of the future. Yeah, you understand? So Hashem says to the angels at this moment, it's true, that's what his descendants will do in the future. But who is he today? Is he tzaddik today or is he Rasha? Does he have a devout classification or an evil classification? They say no, today, that's something in the future. He today has a devout classification. So he said, if that's the case, I will perform the miracle on his behalf, and he will live. And therefore, what's going to take place in the future is not relevant to the now. That's the midrash. So there's an obvious question asked. What did the angels say? If he lives, his descendants are going to cause the death of your children in the future. But if they see that, evidently God already made the decision he's living. Because if he's dying, there are no descendants in the future, which are going to cause the demise of the Jews in the future. So what's even the consideration to say he should die? It's already a fait accompli. God is performing the miracle. Because he's not performing the miracle, there are no Arabs in the future to bring about the demise of the Jewish people. You found the question. The answer which is given is similar to what we're talking now. The angels, you realize, an angel's understanding is unlimited. Because they understand the nature of this man, Ishmael now, they understand it's like you have the one cell animal, the amoeba, and if you understand, you have DNA and you understand the makeup of DNA, you're able to roll it out 1,000 years in the future and understand what that DNA is going to produce. Because you have such a level of foresight. The angel understand if this man is this man and he has these inborn characteristics, generation after generation, what's going to be the 30th generation from today? They're going to be people who are going to be anti-Semitic, and they're going to have this level of deception and deceit, and they're going to mislead your children, they're going to offer salty fish and they're going to cause their death. Not that it actually happened. That's how this is going to foretell what the future is, because they understand the actual nature of this man today. He will produce this evil in the future. So God says, but he didn't produce it yet. That's all potential, but that's not him. Therefore, he lives, doesn't die. The following. The Navi, the prophet, is given insight that he understands the inner workings of existence today, and as a result of that, he could foretell what's going to be in 1,000 years from now. Because the depth and breadth of that understanding is so absolute, because it was communicated to him by God, he sees many horizons into the future. He sees which other people don't see. He has an understanding. And his understanding is not abstract, but it's a reality. It's a reality of existence. We say, Ezel Chochem Arosa Noah. Who's a wise man? The one who sees the ramifications of events. So I always ask a question. It's in Pirkei Avos. Ezel Chochem Arosa Noah. A person's wise, you say. He understands the ramifications. What do you mean he sees? Seeing is, there's nothing which is the equivalent of seeing. Seeing is clarity. A person's wise. It's more than abstract knowledge. It's reality. If somebody comes to me, asks me advice, and I say to him, you make that decision, it's not, I understand it's going to be disastrous. It is disastrous. You make that decision, you're actually, you're destroying your life. That's how clear it is to me. So I see it. It's not, I understand it. It's a reality. It's a whole different level of internalization of that reality. That's roeh. If the chochem is roeh, sees it, seeing is believing, the prophet goes beyond that. Because much as seeing was subject to human error, a prophet is not subject to error. Because his inside track is given to him by God. That's divinely communicated to him. So therefore, that path that he sees evolve is a straight path, and it's a definite path. Because when God shows him the beginning of that route, he sees all the way to the end of that route. Exactly what path to follow. And anything off that path is disastrous. So the prophet, when God shares with him the many things he understands, we find that at the splitting of the sea, we said every prophet sees an image. At the beginning of the sea, the splitting of the sea, how did Moshe see God? The Torah says, we say, Osiyoshe, the song of the sea, Hashem ish milchama, Hashem shmo. God is a man of war. What do you mean he's a man of war? God is infinite. God is absolute in every sense of the word. What is a man of war? What it means, Moshe Rabbeinu had seen the image of God, that he's a warrior. The way God is relating to this existence at this moment is to destroy the Egyptians. God has no form. But God, in terms of his depiction of himself at that moment to the prophet, he's showing exactly his level of involvement in existence at this moment. And he's seen as a warrior, it means to destroy Egypt. And they were destroyed. After he sinned with the golden calf, and Moshe Rabbeinu supplicated for forgiveness, God appeared to Moshe as an elderly sage cloaked in the talus, praying. It's to teach Moshe Rabbeinu that if there's ever a time where the Jewish people, where their existence is in question, if you say the 13 attributes of mercy, you will activate the most advanced level of mercy to save the Jewish people. So he was like an elderly sage praying, beseeching Hashem for mercy. That's what it was. So each guise which the prophet sees is to understand exactly what's happening at this moment, how God's interacting with his existence at this moment. When we see God is merciful, God is awesome, God is kind, It's not the essence of God. I said this 1,000 times. The Ramchal says, the Maral says it. We have no idea who God is. Finite cannot fathom infinite. So how does God give us an inkling of who he is? He doesn't give us, he gives us an inkling how he relates to this existence. He relates to this existence through mercy, through indiscriminate kindness, through judgment. There's many ways he relates, but it doesn't reflect on who he is. We have no idea who he is. All we know one thing, he's Echod. God is infinite. There's no beginning, there's no end. Ato Rishon, Ato Achron, you're the first, you're the last. Pre-existence, all that existed was only you. Everything's ex nihilo.